This video is brought to you by MoviePalette.com and enter ROOM15 for 15% off of your palette. Hey horror fans, I'm the Blood Guy, and I hope you all had a great Christmas, and welcome back to another review of a film based on a real-life serial killer. And this is one that I've actually wanted to see for quite a while. I'd never seen it. It's another TV movie, though I'll say right off the bat, it's one of the lesser TV movies. But when I went through and initially made my list of ones to check out, I saw this was based on another one of my probably top 10, I guess, favorite serial killers, favorite cases. I've always been fascinated by this story and this killer. And I didn't know there was this film about him. In fact, I thought there was only one movie based on him, and that was actually sort of a fictional film with him as a backdrop, but I'll get into that. But it's a 1985 made-for-TV movie, and yes, this is a bootleg. I had to get a bootleg because there's never been a physical release of this. I did come across a full uncut upload on YouTube, but there was no audio, so that didn't help me out any. But it's a 1985 made-for-TV movie, Out of the Darkness, starring Martin Sheen. And it tells the story. I thought this was going to be a David Berkowitz film, the Son of Sam, New York, 1976 and 77. It's more about Eddie Zigo, one of the detectives. He wasn't part of the Omega Task Force. He was part of a different precinct, but he was one of the detectives that helped solve the Son of Sam case and one of the arresting officers. It's actually more about him. It's not really a David Berkowitz film. Hell, I would even say this film, this is a much better movie. However, this is the kind of film I was trying to stay away from, but Spike Lee's Summer of Sam, I would say, is actually a better David Berkowitz film. The actor in this did fine, but it's really just the last couple scenes. Like, once he gets caught, his interrogation, and then it ends. It leaves out a lot of information, actually. And I've read that it's like 2 hours, but here it's 96 minutes. IMDb says like 96 minutes, so I'm guessing it's right. But the way it's edited and the way it's shot, it does feel like a lot is cut out. Now, this is a fictional story based on a fictional group of friends, but with the factual Son of Sam summer going on in the background. Basically just to show the paranoia of the city. This is a much better movie, and it handled the Berkowitz stuff much better. But it's not really enough of a Berkowitz film to really kind of review as a serial killer film. This is more about the investigation, and I've been finding that more films I get into, especially some of the more TV films, are more about the investigation. Now, I will say there's more killer David Berkowitz in this than, say, This Is Personal, which I reviewed. But it's still decent, and there is a lot of Hollywood. It sort of did get the Hollywood treatment for a lot of stuff. There's a lot about Eddie Zigo's personal life that I did not know about and could not find, so I couldn't really tell how factual it was. And it doesn't really go into detail with the Berkowitz murder, so it was kind of hard to tell what they were trying to base it off of. But it was written by T.S. Cook and directed by Judd Taylor. Of course, stars Martin Sheen. We even do get kind of a cheeky, funny little scene when they're canvassing neighbors, knock on a door, and there's a guy covered in shaving cream who shuts the door in their face, and Martin Sheen says, "Nice boy." It's Charlie Sheen. But, yeah, he plays Eddie Zigo. And the real Eddie Zigo actually makes an appearance in this as well. But it also stars Hector Elizondo, Matt Clark, Jennifer Salt, Val Avery, and a brief appearance by Joe Spinell, Frank Zito from the original Maniac. This was just a couple years before he died. Also had an appearance in Taxi Driver, Godfather 2. It's a great character actor. Awesome to see him in this. And Robert Trevor played David Berkowitz. And Robert Trevor did do a good job. I've seen him in a lot of things. The only thing that really sticks out in my mind the most is he was the Groucho-obsessed, or Marx Brothers-obsessed film critic in Devil's Rejects. It doesn't have the original cover, but yeah, that's Trevor as Berkowitz. And he does fine. They do recreate some of the stuff involving Berkowitz, but there's a lot that they cut out. It does focus more on Zigo's personal life. It really tells more of the story about this hard-boiled, driven detective is on the biggest case in New York's history, and it pulls him away from his home life as his wife is dying of cancer. It does have a lot of family drama incorporated in it. And it originally aired October 12th of 85 on CBS. Now, I like to think I'm fairly well versed in the David Berkowitz story. More so David Berkowitz, not necessarily Eddie Zigo or Joseph Borelli, the captain of homicide in Queens and lead of the Omega Task Force. But I have seen and read plenty on Berkowitz. I got this DVD, NBC with the interview of Berkowitz and Dahmer, not together, but two separate interviews. Of course, he's in these, the cover of this, because Berkowitz is one of the most notorious serial killers. I mean, I would say if you made a list of the top 10 American serial killers, he'd have to be on there. Certainly the most notorious of New York, for sure. But, I just got this book for Christmas, Serial Killers of the 70s. Of course, whether it's America, New York, or 70s, Berkowitz has kind of become synonymous with that. I did just order Lawrence Klausner's book, Son of Sam, one of the earlier books that was written about him. Excuse me. There are a few books that Berkowitz wrote himself, one of which was right after his conviction in 78. There are some of his journal books that have been released, but they're really pricey. A couple of these really thin, more so pamphlet books that I didn't realize they were that small when I ordered them. And of course, the Netflix Ultimate Evil book, which I really don't subscribe to the idea that there were multiple Sons of Sam. That's not what this video is about, so the comment section should not be about that theory. That's for another video. And of course, every encyclopedia I have that Berkowitz shows up in. And of course, other than Out of the Darkness, there's also Spike Lee's Summer of Sam. And there's another one with Naomi Watts. I think it's called The Wolf Hour, which I believe is similar to Summer of Sam. I haven't seen it where it's more so just a woman in her apartment, paranoid that Son of Sam is coming after her, kind of like an early Polanski type film. But I also have this pamphlet, which Berkowitz himself sent me as a response to a letter that I sent him. Just sort of hit a quick story, how he became the Son of Hope, which he's now known as. You can buy these for like $4 on his website, ariseandshine.com, which if you want to see modern pictures of him, that's where you'll see it. Which the pictures I'll put up when I talk about Robert Trevor and the acting in the film. They're not the most recent, but if you want to find recent photos. And it was cool for Berkowitz himself to send me this, so I really like that. So now getting to Out of the Darkness, I mean, it dives right in. Son of Sam is already known. He's not the .44 caliber killer. He's Son of Sam. He's already been going on. Most of the film takes place during the winter, which almost all of his kills were in the summer, save for one in October, one in November. The acting isn't bad. I'd say Martin Sheen does do a pretty good job. In fact, there's another TV film the same year, 1985, that he was in that I'm really interested in checking out. It's like 4.5 hours. It's called Atlanta Child Murders, based on Wayne Williams and that case between 79 and 81. And it really just shows very loosely, very quickly. It does go at a fast pace. Just the leads he goes through trying to find David Berkowitz. And it's not really that in depth. It does focus more on his family or his personal life. Kind of the cop that he was, which his family would go on to say that he was the epitome of a brave, respectable cop. He did pass away at the age of 84 in 2011. Do I wish there was a bit more Berkowitz in here? I mean, if you want to do one mainly about the investigation, fine, but sprinkle a little bit of Berkowitz in there like this film did. I think that would have worked out just fine. Because I do think Trevor did do a good job. You know, he's kind of got the hair. He's, especially the grin. He's got this great big grin, very similar to Berkowitz. Actually, Trevor looks more like Berkowitz nowadays. As they're both older, they look more alike. But even back then, you know, he did look the part very well. He's even wearing the blue button-down shirt, and as he's being arrested, he's all smiles. During his interrogation, he's all smiles and sort of acting crazy. So Trevor probably was the highlight of this film when you finally get to him. And not that it's a slow movie, but it doesn't really get super factual as far as the murders go, because the murders seem to just happen at random, and they play out almost like dream sequences or flashbacks. You know, slow motion, up close to the gun. It almost looks like the same couple every time in the car that gets shot. It's not up until the final kill or the final attack on Stacy Moskowitz and Robert Violante on July 31st of 77, when they sort of recreate the final attack, then it becomes more factual. Then, because there's no dates or anything in this, it's really hard to tell what exactly they're trying to recreate or what some of the scenes are based on or where the story's going. So up until after they recreate, or after that final attack happens, which is hard to tell because Stacy Moskowitz was blonde, the only blonde, which is huge in this case. You know, because all of his victims had long blonde hair, so women were getting their hair cut short and dyeing it blonde. This movie kind of glosses over that. But once we get to that attack, then it becomes more factual, you know, with the eyewitness, the parking ticket, the searching of his car, his apartment, his arrest. So it's kind of more factual towards the end. And again, it's not quite what I was expecting. I mean, it's still well made for what it is. It does feel more Hollywood than some other films, even some more detective procedural films that I've seen. But the stuff that's really based on Berkowitz, that you can actually tell is based on something specific of the Son of Sam case, it actually is pretty well done. And Martin Sheen does fine, but I would say that Robert Trevor, as little as his part is, he definitely makes the film worth it at the end. But there's really not much to say about it. I was hoping it was going to be better, because this is one I really wanted to see. Because for the longest time, this was the only Son of Sam sort of based film that I had seen. And the only reason why I haven't reviewed it yet is because it's fictional, even though all the Berkowitz stuff in the background is pretty well done. But with that, there's really not a whole lot to say. I mean, it's still worth watching, I guess. It's still worth your time. It's only an hour and a half. I did see you can find it on Vudu. You may have to rent it online somewhere. I just bought this off of VintageShack.com, so you can get yourself a bootleg. It does look cleaner than what you'll find on YouTube for those that are wondering for quality Nazis, but yeah, it it's not terrible, but it's certainly not the best made-for-TV movie I've seen. And at this point, not the best Berkowitz film that I've seen, but it's still worth your time. So with that, I guess we'll get into the just a brief summary, the cliff notes, and then the fact and fiction analysis of the film itself. So as always, I like to give a brief summary on the killer that the film is based on. So David Berkowitz, born Richard David Falco, originally called the .44 caliber killer, then known by his self-appointed name, Son of Sam, is one of America's most notorious killers, and one of the most notorious in the state of New York. For almost exactly a year, between July 29th of 76 and July 31st of 77, Berkowitz killed 7 and wounded 6 people. He targeted women, but most were in parked cars and often with the male companion, and using his .44 caliber Charter Bulldog pistol. The fact a number of his female victims had long brown hair scared the women of New York City into cutting their hair short and dyeing it blonde, though Berkowitz would later state that their hair length and color had nothing to do with his selection. He was also known to have started a large number of fires, something he enjoyed since childhood. Berkowitz would send letters to the press and police consisting of taunts, threats, and crazy ramblings. These letters are where he first addressed himself as Son of Sam. After his widely publicized arrest, where he was infamously seen smiling almost non-stop, he stated that a 1,000-year-old demon named Sam commanded him to kill and spill the blood of pretty young girls, and that Sam was his former neighbor Sam Carr, and that Carr's black Labrador Harvey was also possessed and commanded him to kill. He later recanted this, saying he was trying to sound insane, and other inmates later ridiculed him for these claims. After going through a suicidal patch in prison, he found God and became the Son of Hope. In many interviews, he speaks of spreading the gospel and actually helping a number of people. In the years since his conviction in 1978, there have been theories and investigations into whether Berkowitz acted alone or if there really were other Sams out there, or sons out there, as he once claimed, but as of yet, nothing has been proven. And so now we get to the film itself, and of course it opens up with the opening scroll that's narrated by Martin Sheen, which is pretty much what I just said. In the years 1976 and 77, a suspect known as Only Son of Sam terrorized New York City with a string of handgun assaults which left 6 people dead and 7 wounded. These killings launched the largest manhunt in the history of New York PD. It was a climate of fear, desperation, and frustration. Here is one story of those days which has never been told. All true, which the number of victims, it was the largest manhunt, and which was led by the Omega Task Force. And it opens up with a couple parking, they're making out, which of course was almost all, but I think 1 or 2 of his attacks. I know one of his attacks was a young woman walking home. He shot at her, she raised her textbook, and it went right through. Of course, his first attack were 2 female friends that were sitting together. But the film doesn't open up with the very first kill. They're shot at, not based on the first murders, which was Donna Lauria, who was 18, and Jody Valenti, 22, both sitting in Valenti's Oldsmobile. Lauria was shot in the head and killed. Valenti was shot in the thigh and lived. That was July 29th of 76. This is a couple, I believe, and there will be more information later, because also they don't even give any names. I think other than Eddie Zigo, all the names in the film are different, or Zigo and his family and Berkowitz. All other names have been changed. But when it comes to the victims, they don't give any names, or really details, so it's really hard to tell who's, like, what kills are happening, what they're supposed to be based on. I think they're just recreating sort of the MO, or just the kinds of scenarios that Berkowitz would kill in. So then it shows the 60th precinct. Or wait, hold on. My notes are all screwed up. So it opens up. And then we see the 65 precinct, which I think Zigo actually worked at the 60th precinct. And it was either the 60th or the 109th precinct that had the Omega Task Force, which Zigo didn't work for. Omega was based out of Queens. And one guy reads off one of Sam's letters, which is almost verbatim to the May 30th, 77 letter to columnist Jimmy Breslin. So the first scene must have been based on his 6th attack, which was April 17th of 77, which was the attack on Alexander Esau, who was 20, and Valentina Suriani, who was 18. Partkar, Berkowitz shot once, Suriani was shot once, Esau twice, both in the head. Suriani died at the scene, and Esau died in the hospital several hours later. They were his 4th and 5th murder victims, but 6 others had survived at that time. Because that was just prior, a month prior to the letter sent to Jimmy Breslin. So I'm guessing that's what the opening murder was supposed to be. And the precinct already knows him as the son of Sam and that he likes long-haired girls and that women are cutting their hair short. Omega Task Force in Queens is mentioned. True. It started in March of 77. Zigo is working the case by now, but I read that he was assigned to Son of Sam after the July 31st, 77 murder of Stacy Moskowitz, which was actually the final attack, the final victims. She was 19, his 6th victim, and the wounding of Robert Violente, who was 20. And the murder shocked people because she had short dyed hair, which was supposed to protect her from Son of Sam. So I read that that's when Zigo first came into the picture, but the film makes it look like he's already been on it. But then we get scenes like Zigo chases a suspect based on, there's all these people ganging up around this guy's house, saying he's the son of Sam based on a sketch, composite sketch. So he keeps taking hostages throughout this chase. That never happened. I think it's just supposed to portray the climate of the fear and paranoia that people were feeling at that time. The guy's name was Henry. Shows Zigo at home with his wife Anne and 3 kids. I know he had at least 2 kids, Susan and Eddie the third. Eddie is credited as Junior in the film. And his first wife, Anna, that was her name, Anna, but she would go on to die of cancer. In the film, we'll show that as well. There's another shooting, which is an 18-year-old male, but who was sitting alone in his car but had long hair, so they think maybe Sam thought it was a woman. But none of Son of Sam's victims was just a lone male, which, of course, the film would go on to fix this by Zigo saying this isn't Son of Sam, it's mob-related. It's shown to be wintertime, but all murders occurred in spring or summer, with the only later year attacks being one in October and one in November of 76. Sign on the door says Son of Sam Task Force, must be the Omega Task Force. Zigo goes to meet a guy named Tom Duncan, head of the task force, to tell him that the previous murder is mob-related, not SOS. I think Duncan is supposed to be based on Joseph Borelli, who, as I've said, was the head of homicide and captain of police in Queens and the head of the Omega Task Force. Another man is questioned based on his beige van, which I know a yellow, tan, brown van being a tip. I do know that those colors were given from eyewitnesses. Zigo thinks it's him because he works at a bar called Delilah's, and based on the story of Delilah and Samson, Sam's son. I never read about that being a theory. Shows another couple making out being shot. No details or names given, or anything. At the station, they are told to go through the names of all those with registered .44 caliber Charter Arms Bulldog pistols, as that was his weapon of choice. True, he used that on all of his victims, and hence his original moniker, .44 caliber killer. And Zigo dies in the hospital after surgery. She did die of cancer. I don't know if it was exactly as portrayed in this, like if it was after a surgery and things were fine, then things got complicated and she died. It had a bit more of a schmaltzy Hollywood feel to it. Another shooting of a couple making out in a car, but then it immediately shows the news crews there, and a news guy says both shot in the head, she was killed, he was rushed to the hospital in a critical condition. So I'm guessing this is the Stacy Moskowitz, Robert Violente attack, the final attack. Though Violente lived, almost and losing his left eye, this was his final attack. The film shows winter again, and again, nothing ever happened in winter. Zigo goes to see the survivor, whose head and eye is covered, so I'm guessing it's supposed to be a Violente. Sorry, I'm stuttering so bad. Says she saw her attacker but was unable to describe him, and he did see him, which is true. They get word to go talk to an eyewitness of the last shooting, a woman who was walking her dog, and said she saw a cop give a parking ticket to an illegally parked car. This is true, so from this point on is when we get more factual. True, Cecilia Davis was walking her dog around the scene of the Moskowitz Violente attack when she saw a car parked in a hydrant, get a parking ticket, and a suspicious man holding a dark object to get into the car. And then she took the dog home. She got inside. That's when she heard the gunshots. They look into the parking tickets and see it was issued to David Berkowitz, a Jewish man from Yonkers. True. Zigo goes to investigate Berkowitz's car, parked outside his apartment, sees a gun on the back seat and a bunch of ammunition wrapped in a blanket. True. Though the ammo was in a duffel bag. Zigo finds a note in the glove box stating death in the Hamptons, signed The Monster. True. Along with maps of the crime scenes and ammo, there was a threatening letter to Inspector Timothy Downs, even though the film just says Dear Inspector. It shows that he lives on Pine Street, which is true. He lived on 35 Pine Street, which has since been changed to either 42 or 45 Pine Street, just to get rid of the notoriety. Berkowitz walks outside, looks around, gets in the car, gets arrested. True. He walked out of his apartment around 10 p.m., which the film shows that it's daytime. But 10 p.m. entered his yellow Ford Galaxy, and which in the film it's white, and then he's arrested. There's been conflicting stories as to how exactly it happened, but the most accepted one is that the John Palatico, Zigo's partner, John Palatico, he approached the driver's side, put his gun close to his temple, and Sergeant William Gardella pointed the gun at him from the passenger side, and then that was when we had the exchange of, well, you got me. Now that I got you, who do I got? You know who you got. No, I don't. Why don't you tell me? I'm Sam. It doesn't show that exchange. Really, the only kind of differing in stories that I can tell is that he says, well, you got me. What took you so long? But it doesn't show that exchange. In fact, this film shows the arrest a lot more accurately. So he's arrested, and then Trevor portrays Berkowitz as being arrested with all smiles, like constantly smiling and laughing. True, you go back and watch news footage, he's constantly looking around, just unable to control his smile. Even wearing blue jeans and the button-down blue shirt, but since it's winter, he's wearing a green a military jacket, which he would wear during some of his attacks, and Berkowitz was in the Air Force. They tell their superior that although there were firearms in the car, no 44 was found, which the 44 was in a plastic bag, in a brown paper bag, on the driver's seat next to Berkowitz, which I don't know if they found, I don't remember if they found that initially when they first arrested him, but the film makes it look like they arrested him, couldn't find the 44 amidst all the weapons, and then they go back to the car, and then they find the 44. But it does show them finding it in a plastic bag, in a brown paper bag, so... so then they find it. Then there's the interrogation scene where Berkowitz says, he actually loves women, but he was forced to kill them. No lines that I've heard, like, I never wanted to hurt them, I only wanted to kill them. But he does say that Sam is a 1,000-year-old devil that told him to kill, true. And spoke to him to give him blood of young pretty girls, true. Mentions the non-stop barking dog, true. Which, there is a scene when they're staking out Berkowitz's apartment, and a guy on a truck drives by, and he's like, it's about time you showed up. And when he drives off, there's some sort of black, kind of German Shepherd-looking dog in the bed of the truck. I think that's supposed to hint at Sam Carr and Harvey. But he talked about how the dog barked all night, nonstop. His neighbor Sam Carr is the Sam in The Son of Sam, black Labrador named Harvey. And it didn't even mention that Berkowitz shot Harvey once, which he did, but Harvey lived. Berkowitz says he was adopted, true. And it shows Zigo taking this confession, even though it was a guy named John Keenan that took the confession. And then it just shows them in a car on the way to county where the massive press is waiting. It doesn't show any of that. It just shows them in the backseat of the car driving there. They mention that it's a press circus, but we don't get to see any of it. And that's one of those scenes where, it feels like it cuts. Like, it feels like an uncut version of the film. The editing is very choppy. It feels very rushed. And then we just see Zigo going to some celebration party, and a voiceover says, Ed Zigo retired from the NYPD in May of '82 and is now in Long Island, which is true. And that is 1985's Out of the Darkness. It feels very rushed. It feels more Hollywood than it does factual. Again, the more factual stuff doesn't really come in until the final victims onward. And even then, it still feels very rushed. But Robert Trevor plays Berkowitz pretty well. Not the best I've seen. That's obviously Mindhunter. The guy in Mindhunter is... I should have mentioned him earlier. But I would say that the guy in Mindhunter and the guy in... which I'm guessing is Anthony LaPaglia. I'm not entirely... I don't remember exactly if it was him. He did a good job as Berkowitz in Summer of Sam. But Trevor did a fine job. I do wish there was more scenes with him in it. Narratively, it makes sense. It's one of those movies where we don't get to see him until the inspectors do, so it kind of makes sense. I mean, it's well made for an 80s TV movie, but it's nowhere near being among the best that I've seen. But it's decent. I do wish that there was more Berkowitz in it. Not even necessarily the murders, but what makes him so fascinating is just, some of the stuff he would do in his apartment, like with the graffiti and just the mess of his apartment, really stuff that this film shows, or more of the interrogation. or even show like depressed when he's walking through all the cameras after his arrest. But it feels rushed, but it's decent. So yeah, that's 1985's Out of the Darkness, based on The Hunt for Son of Sam. Now, I do have some more serial killer films coming in. Uh, Again, Atlanta Child Murders, which I really want to see because I've always been interested in Wayne Williams, and I did just finish Mindhunter, but it's like 4.5 hours, so I'm not sure when I'll get to that. But I do have 3 or 4 more serial killer films on the way. Not sure when they'll get here. But stay tuned for those, and thank you for watching.